99.7 and 1450 WHTC. Giving Dan Evans a little bit of a break now. Our monthly chat with Dr. Brian Long. He is the Director of Supply and Management Research at Grand Valley State University. He joins us on the other end of our Zoom connection. Brian, good morning and happy May. Or is it a happy May?
Well, it depends on how you look at anything, I guess, as to how happy it is. In the case of the world economy right now, you would believe that we were on a fairly consistent track for continued recovery from not only the Great Recession, but the COVID recession. But unfortunately, the comments that we're getting from our participants are getting increasingly pessimistic. That's not good.
Yeah, as your current business trends monthly report, you canvass purchasing managers in the Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo markets to comprise your report. And the headline was, the economy remains stable, but pessimism grows. What's the biggest concern by these purchasing managers that you were able to get from your survey?
What they believe is that there is a greater possibility of a recession coming. These people, many of them have been around for some ups and downs in the economy, and they know the telltale signs of what a recession looks like a few months in advance. And they are beginning to see those kinds of signs cropping up right now, and hence the reason for their pessimism.
Unfortunately, you have, I don't want to say a pessimistic streak, but you're still calling 70% odds of a recession over the next 12 months?
Regrettably, yes. And the reason for that, of course, is that the Federal Reserve has painted itself into a proverbial corner. They should have been on this whole inflation thing a whole lot earlier than they were. And part of it, of course, relates to politics. Raising interest rates is not popular with politicians, particularly those who happen to be in the White House. And I can remember this all the way back to Lyndon Johnson getting upset about an increase in interest rates. And that's been pretty much the case for the politicians ever since. And for that reason, I think that the Fed held off, realizing that they were going to get heavily criticized if they started raising rates too soon, because it was going to dampen the economy. But that's what an increase in interest rates does. But unfortunately, that's exactly what needed to happen before we got to this level of inflation that we have right now that's going to be even more difficult to control.
You're starting to sound like Ben Bernanke. He told that to CNBC earlier this week.
Ben Bernanke was a student, if you will, of the Great Depression. And he was also a student of what the interest rate should do. He was a big fan of Paul Volcker, of course. Paul Volcker recognized that in order to stabilize the dollar, because the dollar was losing value rather rapidly, inflation was running wild, he recognized the only way to do that was to crank interest rates up to the point that it literally hurt the economy. The Federal Reserve created a recession back in the late 1970s. As a result, the dollar stabilized and we enjoyed the better part of 40 years of stable monetary growth, stable economy, and stable interest rates. We don't remember the problem that we're having right now of 8.5% inflation. You have to be one of those people that was buying merchandise back in the 70s to remember that. And most of the population right now doesn't remember that.
Yeah, short memories and even those who were around, they don't have those long memories that unfortunately you and I have. And the comments that Jerome Powell, the current Fed chair, have said over the last few days, warning that reining in soaring inflation may cause economic pain for some. That soft landing apparently is not going to happen.
Soft landing has never happened as far as the Fed is concerned. They talk about a soft landing. I'm going to say they've had some softer landings, but in every case, we've ended up with at least some kind of a recession that wasn't planned as far as the Fed was concerned.
We're talking with Dr. Brian Long, the Director of Supply and Management Research at Grand Valley State University. You keep an eye on the manufacturing sector as well as the employment sector. Automotive, office furniture, the two biggest manufacturing hubs, if you want to call it that, for our region. How concerned are the manufacturers, especially in automotive, that we're still going to have the problem with the chip shortages going further and farther along? Some say it was expected to be long. It looks like it's going to be that way.
The way it looks right now, according to the people in our survey, is that it won't be over in 2022, and that it will be well into 2023 before we have absolute stability as far as the automotive end of the chip market is concerned. This means, of course, reduced production schedules. We don't assemble automobiles on this side of the state, but of course, we are relegated, our auto parts manufacturers are relegated to the production schedules. And they get some very short notices sometimes less than 24 hours notice that, oh, gee, don't ship us anymore. We've got too many and we're shutting down. And of course, we have these 2-week shutdowns that are typical in the industry right now. Little by little, they're working their way around it. But often that means that they're actually changing the configuration of the automobiles and the trucks that they're building to use fewer chips. It isn't actually solving the problem.
Yeah, well, some stopgap measures, I'm afraid that's the case. How about employment? Are we still dealing with the Great Resignation and the effects of that? Or are we going to start seeing maybe more people in the market, but at the same time, maybe the jobs that were plentiful or available are going to start drying up?
They may dry up, of course, if we get into a recession. And we hope that, of course, doesn't happen, but it's still a high probability. The manufacturers in West Michigan are still looking for more people. And yes, the Great Resignation is still going on because people keep rotating from one job to another job that maybe pays $1 or $2 an hour more. The other problem that they have is that the people that are there are being pressed to do more and more. It can be very hectic to be working in one of these minimum wage jobs where at the end of the day, you're just totally exhausted. And that wasn't the plan of what was supposed to happen, but it comes back to the employer can't hire enough people. And so the people that are there pick up the brunt. And sooner or later, some of them just give up and say, I can't handle this anymore. And they move on to another job.
Yeah, they sort of wear out. And then you have to hire 5 people to do the job, but maybe 2 that happened a little bit earlier. Obviously, high gas prices are a pain in the you-know-what to the consumers who have to pay those prices directly, but it's also we're paying for it with higher costs of goods and services. How much of a concern about transportation costs and fuel costs do your respondents have about the long-term effects of what looks to be a summer of high fuel prices?
Well, this is, of course, a problem. The high fuel prices is one thing, but we also have a shortage of trucks. We have a shortage of truck drivers. We have a shortage of rail cars. We have a shortage of ocean-going containers. Just about everything in the entire supply chain is in short supply to a certain extent right now. We're not just exactly sure how long this will last, but as I indicated, when the economy does slow down, that's when we catch up. There's a lot of hoarding going on right now, which is typical of rising prices and the lack of availability. And we don't see where it is right now. We won't see it until, once again, the economy slows down and then people start living off of their inventory.
One final thing, the international marketplace has been I don't want to say quiet, but it has not gained the big attention we've seen earlier when the Ukraine situation came up. Is that going to change anytime soon, Brian?
Probably not. We are going to have to wait until the end of this Ukrainian war before things will absolutely stabilize, particularly as far as Europe. Europe is one of our major customers, and the usual rule of thumb is where the war isn't is where the economy is good because there's the buildup for the war. But in the case of Europe right now, all of Europe is starting to slow down, partly out of just plain pessimism. And now here we are with also the problem of getting shipments out of China right now. This jams up the supply chain in the other direction. So we've got lots of supply chain problems. Some firms are working around it better than others, I'm going to say. And that's where, again, supply chain professionals come in and earn their money.
He is Dr. Brian Long. He joins us once a month to talk about the regional economy as he comprises his survey of purchasing managers in the Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids markets for his current business trends report. He is the Director of Supply Management Research at Grand Valley State University. As always, Brian, thank you very much for your time. Wish you and your family well over the Memorial Day holiday. And if all goes well, we'll do this again in June.
I will look forward to that.